And it's like having that humility, the way that you face a cue, even though that's like a kind of a microcosm of what a show is, but the mindset is exactly the same.
Yep.
It's like you're honoring something else, and you're there for that purpose. And you have to, in a sense, you got to check your ego at the door and go, I'm here for a purpose. I'm here to do a job.
What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Cues podcast, your weekly insight into the world of production, library, and sync music. Whether you're just curious about the industry, or maybe you have thousands of placements, either way, I promise you're in the right place. As always, a huge word of thanks to the family, friends, and neighbor subscribers of 52 Cues who keep all of this happening. If you want to learn more about how you can support 52 Cues while also scoring a ton of subscriber perks, be sure to tune in a little bit later in today's episode. Speaking of today's episode, I sit down and chat with Dale Grisa, who is not only a 52 Cues family member, but also a staple in the Detroit music scene. We talk about his early life, coming up through Detroit, studying jazz, transitioning into production and library music, how he works on musical theater, doing theater arrangements, but beyond all of that, how Dale is the king of collaboration. So we're going to be sitting down and talking with him a little bit later. Then at the end of the episode, I'm going to be unpacking or showing you one of my latest Latin pop cues that I did in collaboration with Jeff LaPlante. It is called Here I Dembo Again. And so be sure to tune in on that. As far as my week, it's really good to be back with you today. Not a ton has been happening in my composing world, other than getting this Latin pop album out the door. I'm dangerously close once again to overcommitting and under-delivering. I have a few days left to wrap these up, but as we'll show you a little bit later when we go over the cue, I got an order from the publisher looking for 10 cues, 10 Latin pop cues that he needed by the end of October. And I thought, that feels like a really heavy lift, but there was some upfront money, which is great. Just some kind of consideration fees, nothing major, right? But I thought, how can I do this? I'm not going to have the time to write all of these, especially in a style that I don't write a ton of to begin with. I mean, I can bring the Latin percussion to the table all day long, but writing Latin pop wasn't really in my wheelhouse, let alone something that I could do in just a matter of weeks. So that's when I put up the bat signal to 52 Cues, King of Pop, Jeff LaPlante, and we're collaborating. And that's been hugely, hugely helpful and something that I want to commit to next year. In fact, I think this might be my year. Is 2025 for me? It is. I'm calling it now, folks. 2025 is my year of collaboration. And so I am committed to being better with collaborating, being better with recognizing what maybe I don't do well and finding people that can come alongside me and support those things. Now, what it means for me as far as collaborating is I can't wait till the last minute. I have to communicate my needs. I can't just suffer in silence, and I have to recognize when I'm unable, either because of time or skill, to reach my goal. And so 2025 is going to be my year of collaboration. And so already starting a little bit early, and like I said, we'll listen to Here I Dembo Again a little bit later. Also, if you'll notice, the background looks a little bit different because I dug out my old DJ rig because, a while ago, I bought this guy, which is cool, right? A DJ controller. and it has some really like I realized I've missed onboard effects kind of in real time. I've missed doing that, but man, nearly 20 years ago, I was doing much more live DJ work, and so I actually went into my storage area, brought out my DJ rig, complete with actual vinyl records. These are like scratch records, and these are DJ Rectangle stuff. And so I am sure that like these samples aren't cleared. That is for that's for future Dave to worry about. But I'm really, really excited about getting back into scratching, because scratching on the DJ controller I've not enjoyed that. I like the tactile, like doing mixing, I think is really, really cool on the controller. Doing effects and filter sweeps and crossfades and all that's really, really good. But actual scratching, I have not enjoyed it on a controller versus scratching on a deck. So I'm looking forward to incorporating that into more cues. And so if you notice, if you're a long-time watcher, the background changes, but that's what's happening. That's what's happening up here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into my recent interview with the king of collaboration and phenomenal B3 player, Dale Grisa. I am so honored, happy, thrilled. I don't know. Pick your expletive. No, expletive. That's not the right word. Pick your honorific. No, I am so blank to welcome our resident B3 monster, the Detroit's finest, Dale Grisa, joins me on the podcast today. What is happening, Dale?
Not too much. I just want to thank you for having me today.
Oh, man.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
Oh, man. It's so good having you. And of course, we go to the same barber,
We do.
The barber of shave it off to remove all doubt, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Just lean into it. The 21st.
Yeah, you got to lean into it. It took me a
21st
while
century.
to grapple with that, but I did.
Yeah, really. Well, by the way, we'll talk music here in a second. When was it? How old were you? How old were you?
So I was, I turned 60 this week. It's so weird. That
Oh
is
my
so
gosh,
weird.
that can't possibly be true, dude.
No, it can't possibly be true. I still feel 21 and act like it, But I kind of kept most of my hair till I was around 30. And then I was probably 38 or something like that. And it started going. And then finally I just went,
nope, screw it.
Yep. And then at that point I was like all in. And it took me about 2 weeks to settle into going, this is cool. This is way better.
Oh yeah, it's so much. And see, and you don't even have a long beard. You keep it nice. Yeah, that's easy. You're in and out of the shower in just a few minutes, I'm sure.
Oh, it's minutes. Yes, it is.
Yeah, see, for me, I was in college. I was closer to 28 or more like 24 or 25. Yeah. And it's just, I think I've told the story. I was growing out my hair. I was like, yeah, I want long hair, but it was the summer. I was like, oh, this is too hot. I'll do it during the winter. And I shaved it off. I was like, oh, look what isn't under here, which is a nice solid hairline.
Oh,
anyway,
man.
welcome to Bald Talk with Dale and Dave.
Right.
We need to start our own podcast now.
We really should.
Anyway.
Yes.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast, first of all,
Yeah.
I like you. You're a cool dude, man. Up in Detroit,
Likewise.
and I like featuring members of our community, especially members who have achieved a great deal of success in other areas, because I think it's fascinating to talk about, our individual journey into the world of production music. No two look alike, and that means that there is no quote unquote right or wrong way to do this. So tell us a little bit about maybe your upbringing, your path in music, and what in the world led you to production and library music, considering all of your success.
Sure. Well, grew up in suburban Detroit, which is I live in the neighborhood that I grew up in. My mom still lives here. And I'm a pianist, and I studied music at Wayne State University in downtown Detroit. Great faculty there, great jazz department. And, I was focused on jazz performance. And that led me into thousands of gigs, tens of thousands of gigs, and I still play a lot. I play out a lot, and my face is in the Detroit music community, as one of the guys to call. I mean, I'm certainly not the only. That's for sure. And there are some fabulous talent here in Detroit.
But you're high up in the
class.
You're high up in the Rolodex of first.
I like to think so, but.
Calls.
Well, something like that. But, I've been at it a long time, but I'm one of those guys. I'm no prodigy. I've worked for every note that I play. It's come at many, many hours at that piano over there. And so, so early on in my career, I started, I kind of got into, like, in the 90s, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, into MIDI sequencing. So I was like on eMagic. Was it called Logic back then?
Yeah,
oh my God, I can't
eMagic,
remember. It was Logic.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Apple
So back in the early days of it, when it was just a sequencer, and worked through a number of iterations of various DAWs, like through the years. But my focus outside of playing and becoming the best player that I could be was I wanted to get into, ultimately my goal was to open a commercial studio and focus on like music for advertising. Mm-hmm. So through the 90s into the 2000s, I freelanced for a number of music houses in the Detroit area and writing all kinds of stuff for national commercials and like local stuff and everything in between. Those were some really fruitful years. I did a lot of really cool writing, a lot of really cool stuff with some great writers and really nice producers, all that kind of stuff. But it also led to a lot of writing for live events too. So I had a couple of years when I did big thing for Cadillac in like it's 2009, I think, like, and for all of for the International Auto Show, which took place in January of every year, downtown Detroit, biggest auto show in the world. Yeah. So I wrote for all of the release of the new vehicles. I wrote all the music performed by a live group with 14 singers.
Oh my gosh.
It's a big gig. It was really fun. So all of that type of work, which I kind of classify as production, composition, studio work, I put it under the same umbrella. So led to like a couple of stays at a couple of recording studios. I was working as an engineer, house producer, those kind of things. Well, when 2008 came along, it kind of devastated the not only the advertising industry took a massive hit. Detroit seemed to take it really hard, and a lot of the large studios in Detroit that were getting the bulk of their work from the ad industry closed. And so anyway, at that time I was working at a studio in Birmingham, Michigan called RMS Productions. And he happened to be kind of a mid-level studio. And he really sustained that downturn by kind of catering to more mid-level agencies and that kind of stuff. And I stayed on there as a producer and Pro Tools engineer. Kept working, kept gigging, doing all the things that I was doing. And anyway, so as my kind of journey continued, I got divorced, life changed, blah, blah, blah. And I pulled out of music for a couple of years and then kind of came back to it as my life started. I started getting things back on my feet with like more of a fervor and like a love of life and love of music and have kind of had my foot on the gas ever since. But where I'm going with this as far as how I got into production music is that all of that plays into this. It all plays into it. And it's just like, it's still kind of work for hire type of music, the way I kind of look at it. I mean, I know that Dave, I've heard you say many times, it's like, there's the differences in writing music for art and writing it for production music or things that are where it's, I forget how you termed it.
Like we're helping somebody else tell the story or sell, like our music is not the point. It's not the end game here. Our music is helping somebody sell baby dolls or sell cars or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is. It's just like, I kind of came out of that, of doing it for many years more direct to agency type of stuff, but it's still the same type of mindset is the biggest thing. So anyway, I, like many people that are in your community and like a lot of people around the globe, have came to this from Dan Graham's articles that he did in Sound on Sound, which Sound on Sound's the best magazine. I love that magazine. Yep. But anyway, I read those and I went, man, I got to get back. I got to get into this. It's like, and that kind of started my journey. A friend of mine in town here, great guitar player, was a Taxi member, and he started talking about being part of Taxi and the things he was submitting to. And I'm like, to give that a try. And this was around 21, maybe 22. I don't know. Not that long ago. Yeah. And so got into that. And as I started Googling around and doing the whole thing, I found this podcast. And you were like one of the first podcasts that I subscribed to. And so let me see, I went for my first Taxi rally was in 2022. I remember seeing you there. I didn't introduce myself because I was just kind of like figuring out what was going on.
Yeah, because you hadn't done the mastermind or anything by that point.
No, that was in early 23.
Gotcha.
So that was
gotcha. So we didn't chat at the road rally.
No.
Oh man.
No. I didn't really know anybody. I was kind of like, laying back. And
that seems crazy. By now it seems insane because like you came in for the family reunion, like you've been in my house, like, and so it's crazy.
Only a year later, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but
so man, I'm just having a couple of thoughts for the first time because one of the things that I felt with you is almost a kindred spirit, and I think it's the Detroit-Memphis connection. Of course, I lived in Memphis for 11, 12 years.
Yeah. Right.
And so I really identified with Memphis when we moved out there. It's where I spent, my 30s. And your 30s to 40s are some of your absolute most productive times. It's where you're really, it's when you stop giving a crap what anybody thinks about you, and you start having a lot of really kind of, this is who I am, take it or leave it kind of, anyway.
Very true.
So I really, really, just like I identified with Southern California and San Diego, I really identify with Memphis. And there's a lot of similarities between Detroit and Memphis. Obviously, the social climate, and some of the struggles. I think they share a lot of the same kind of economic struggles, some of the same racial struggles as well. How there was once a bustling industry that has now atrophied, and it's just a shadow of what it once was. And you have bigger cities which are doing the same thing and not really giving Detroit their flowers. It's like Memphis doesn't get its flowers the same way like Nashville does. And so, I don't know, there's a salt to the earth kind of grittiness to Memphians that I think Detroitians, is that what you're called?
Detroiters?
Yeah. Detroiters. Would you agree with that? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You are so spot on. It's like, first of all, I'm the biggest proponent of Detroit music and Detroit talent. It's just like, it's world-class here. Yep. It is truly world-class. Every instrument, the bench goes deep, and the bench goes deep and I'm sorry, I will put them up against anybody in the world, and I'm right.
Yep. Yeah.
But, and the music here, it's like the music's got grit, just like Memphis does. And it's like when you hear a good original rock band that comes out of Detroit, it's got some ass on it. I'm sorry, pardon my thing. It's got an edge to it. And it's like, and it's undeniable. And, it's like, we always say, man, it's like musicians come up here, you better bring your A game, man.
I think it comes from just living your life as an underdog, like Detroit is like an underdog. It's not Chicago, it's not any of these policies. Yeah. And I think about how, of course, when Motown was coming up, we had Stax, and at that point, Memphis was kind of to Detroit what Detroit is now to like LA, how like Motown just uprooted and then moved to LA, and then you're just and all these players, just like in Memphis, all these players who were part of that scene, they didn't all move to LA, and so they all stayed and had families and tried to carve out careers in the shadow of what it once was. But I just am now kind of putting that connection about how much Detroit is like Memphis, just in beyond the obvious ways. And I think that is reflected in your quality of work. There is there's a humanity to your work, to your cues. And, talking about world-class players, one of the things that you do really, really well, and now, of course, knowing your history and how you've super plugged into the scene, is you will write a funk cue for the NFL.
Yep.
I'm over here like a chump trying to like program it like in session horns or something like that. But like, a guy who probably studied with a guy who blew on all those Motown records. You know what I mean? And so tell us a little bit about that process of bringing folks in. What are some of the challenges you've run into, and how do you go about kind of balancing, no upfront money, and how do you get these world-class cats to come in and just lay down heat on what are ultimately pretty disposable cues? I mean, if we're just being honest, right?
Yeah, right. Right. Well, it's a juggling act, and I don't have a pat answer for that. And I'm certainly not trying to hoodwink any of my friends into doing anything for me, but a lot of it is just years of relationships. And it's like, I have so many friends through the Detroit music scene on every instrument. And it's like, not that I'm calling in favors necessarily. That kind of comes into play once in a while. But so, let me circle back. If there's something that's a co-write, that's one thing, right? That's like, I'm doing something like recently I did something with a singer here from Detroit, and we truly did a 50-50 on the thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and I tell them what the deal is, if it gets placed, it's 50% of writing, and everybody's usually good with that. Because the other thing is like, people are looking for cool things to do, and it's a lot of fun. And, and if there's the potential for generating something that could maybe turn into a record, turn into a whole album for a library or these kind of things, a lot of people are like usually up for doing something as long as you don't overly tax them. So I take and, obviously do all the administrative work, and I do all the mixing and mastering. I do all of that kind of stuff. And so I only ask for their tracks, whatever they're performing, and their creative input.
Yeah.
If it's a situation where I just need like one instrument on something, sometimes it'll be a situation. I've had some things. I did some stuff with a violinist where I traded out time with her. She had some projects coming up where she needed to come into my home studio. We actually did some stuff at a remote studio also. And, I just kind of set up something where we did a work for hire, and I just traded the time out, where it's like, just reciprocated. That happens quite often. And, and the other thing is just sometimes I just go, man, it's the cost of doing business, and I pay people straight out. And once again, that comes down to going, really, really having your ducks in a row, knowing exactly what you want somebody to do. And it's like, I write everything out, and it's like, and if it's and I know the musicians, if they read, I write it out specifically, and it's like, hand it to them. If they do it from their home studio, they can do it very quickly. And, and then once again, there's a work for hire that happens with that. And
now, do you get like paperwork and all that sorted out along with that, or is it kind of a handshake and a trust type of a situation?
Usually, it depends on the individual, but I have a one-page contract that I need to update, by the way. But
yeah. So you get the paperwork done, and you mentioned, it's not that I'm calling in favors. I would say. Yeah. Speaking of, I would say it's trust. If folks are working with you, are like, well, I know Dale. I've worked with Dale, and he's a good guy, and he's not right. Trying to take advantage of me. What he's trying to do is help me. And so, I'll go in and like lay some horn on his track because I trust Dale. I like Dale. If he says it's good, then let's do it.
Yes.
And so do you have any advice maybe for, let's say, not all of us are in Detroit. Maybe not all of us have, a stable of, 3 or 4 players deep on each instrument that you could call in a pinch.
Right.
Do you have any recommendation for somebody starting out maybe in a town that doesn't have quite the population of world-class players. Any recommendation for them to start bringing in some folks into their tracks?
Boy, oh boy. I mean, I think, within the, well, to me, there's two layers to that. First, there's the on the technical level of being. Well, let me start with this. If within the 52 Qs community, I mean, we have people all over the world now, right? And it's like, and there's guys in like not only Detroit, but all of the major cities. And I think it's a matter of like, for those in our community, it's reaching out to other writers who are doing this, because I'm certainly not exclusive in kind of leaning on live players. Sure. And it's like, it's like if someone reaches out to me, I'd be happy to connect you with a multitude of guys that are in Detroit and in other cities also. And at that level, on the networking end, I think that's a good place to start, because the 52 Qs community is so plugged in. But then once again, it's a matter of being like, professionalism is everything, and knowing exactly what you want from somebody and not being loosey-goosey about anything and having it completely buttoned up at the time that you contact them. They will respect that. And it's like, and you'll get that respect back, but you're going to get a better quality out of their track also.
Yeah.
So I think that answers your question.
A couple of weeks ago, we did the episode on, how do I stay so positive? And one of those is, get plugged into a community, like find your tribe. And so that's one of the things that a community can absolutely help with, is finding, people who are like-minded, agree to all social contract, but also are massively talented and looking for opportunities. And so do you have to do a lot of kind of evangelizing or convincing, or do you have players who know nothing about sync, and when you start talking back end royalties and nothing up front, is there ever any weirdness, or is everybody kind of hip to what sync licensing is these days?
I think a lot of the guys on the pro end of things, I like at least have a cursory knowledge of the way it is, of the way it works, and the fact that so much of what we see on television have shifted that way, right? Yeah. I don't know what the percentages is now, but it's big, as we know. That's why we're here. Yep. And it's I've experienced only just a slight bit of pushback on it, and it's like negligible. Yeah. So, I mean, although I have had to really educate people on it, and have long conversations, like long meaning 15 or 20 minutes about like the way not only the way this works, but where it started and where it's come from and where we see it going, and I know we spend a lot of time in the community talking about that. And that's very important.
Yeah. So you find that they're at least, it's not completely brand new information to them. No, they're somewhat hip to it. No. Yeah. I've worked, most of the people that I work with and collaborate with are pretty hip to it. Although there was one vocalist one time, this was early in my collaboration, right? I think it was even pre 52 Qs and all of that community. I was just like, I was working on some hip hop stuff, and I was like, I want a vocalist. And so through a mutual friend, found an amazingly talented rapper who crushed it, but didn't really understand kind of, hey, you're not going to get any money up front. And when you do get money, it might not be a ton, and it's going to be a while. And so after the first batch, he ghosted me.
Oh, well,
so womp womp.
Yeah, right.
And I decided, if he's not into it, that's cool. Yeah. Because the last thing I need to do is like convince somebody this is a good idea, because there are people out there who are already kind of hip to it and not just know about it, but are receptive to it, because it takes some very patient forward thinking.
It really does, because it's especially, guys who are in my age bracket, we come from a different thing entirely. Yeah. And so, I mean, my God, back in the when I was doing lots of ad music, I wouldn't write something. It was just the norm. This is just the way it worked. You wouldn't write anything. You wouldn't turn your computer on unless there was like $500 coming your way to do the demo. And they would, and a lot of times agencies, I remember it was very commonplace of doing something where agencies would put it out to 3 different music houses. That was kind of the standard thing. Each music house would get like up to $1,500 to submit a couple of demos. And then they would choose, and then that guy would get the gig or whatever,
Right.
you know? And so, I mean, that's long gone.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I do know that does exist in different arenas, but not like it used to.
No. I think it's because, the tools are so much easier to use now, because the only way that you would get anything passable was to hire professionals in a professional studio using live players and professional tools.
That's right.
So, no, we don't need to pay string players anymore to mock up something. But the downside of that is libraries aren't paying demo fees, or like I'm trying to remember if I've ever gotten a demo fee. I've gotten consideration fees from something that they took into their library, and maybe it's never gotten placed, but just, I don't think I've ever gotten any upfront money in the pitching process.
Okay. I
think that happens more in like film music and that kind of, and maybe if we're talking a $300,000, ad placement or something like, then $500 is pocket change. If you're making a $300,000 investment, then $500 is small price to pay to make sure that you get top quality stuff. Right.
On this note though, I had a recent conversation with a good friend of mine. So there's that caveat, we're tight, but this gentleman's a A-list saxophone player in the area, and he has a really great home recording rig. He like really dropped some money. He's got that nice new 2-channel Neve. He's got a Coles, it's this track sound great, So, but we were talking about doing stuff for sync, and as the conversation went on, he came and he said, listen, he goes, I'm into doing this because it's making my craft better. He goes, I understand that, what the situation is on the back end and these kind of things. And it's like, he goes, the more I do this, the better I get at it. And the better I get at it, it spawns not only into production music, but all the other things that I'm doing. And I'm speaking for him. All the other things that I'm doing for this client that's putting a record out over here, or this guy that's doing this live event, or any of that, by the reps, it's like my recording chops are better. My logic chops are better. Everything. It's just like, you got to flex those muscles. And, so but it was almost like a light went off in his head with it. I mean,
yeah, there are some benefits to this, which aren't necessarily just royalties. You know what I mean?
Oh,
there's the non-tangibles of, hey, I get to better my craft, or I get to do something that isn't, working retail, and not to say that we shouldn't be paid and all of that, but, the making of the thing is on some level its own reward,
without question,
Of course,
yeah.
Venues have been taking advantage of that since the dawn of time. I don't know. In Detroit, are they still paying $100 a gig like they are in Memphis?
Yeah. Man, we've been on the $100 gig standard for 45 years.
It's insane.
Crazy.
It's insane, and it gets less and less.
I feel like it's getting a little better, but I'm an optimist,
Now, granted, I haven't, I've officially unplugged from the scene, but when I left Memphis, it was $100.
Yeah.
And it was like if you wanted to play at BB King's, it was $300 for the band. And however big your band was, divide 300.
They don't care. Well, because there's 10 other guys lined up behind them. So,
people want to play on Beale Street, and people want that on their resume, and they're willing to play for next to nothing just because they're clawing at that dream. Yeah, and I think some venues kind of maybe prey on that a little bit, but that's all right. That's all right.
Absolutely.
It is what it is. And I'm proud that I played on Beale Street, but I never want to load into BB King's club again. That load in sucks so bad because they close it off, and you got drums and it's super hilly and
all of that.
Yep, loading. It's still not my worst load in.
Yes.
That was in Memphis, and that was a riverboat. My worst load in.
Oh,
of all time.
Down the big dock thing.
Yep, on the and rocks and everything, and then going okay, here comes. So I'm playing this riverboat, and we go to load in, and we're up on the bank, and the boat is down a bunch of like big rocks. So I couldn't pull my gear because I have like a cart and everything. And then we were upstairs on the riverboat, and the unair conditioned riverboat that only had window units. And so not only could I not take my wheel everything, I had to take it upstairs through a little spiral metal staircase and through the little dining area into the back. Oh my God. That was all for about $100, man.
And you're dripping sweat before you even start.
Oh my God. And to top it all off, we were playing a dinner party for, it was a corporate event, and the clients were international. And so they had literally just gotten off of a flight from Amsterdam, which is about a 6 to 7 hour flight, literally got off the plane, then came on the bus, came to Memphis. It's 10 o'clock at night. We're playing on the river. They are all just jet lagged and falling us. That was my worst. It was a fun gig, but playing, and I'm all like moving around, and I didn't bring the back to my chair because that was just one extra thing to carry.
Carry in.
Yep. Trying not to get seasick. Fun on riverboats in Memphis. But anyway,
it's life in the trenches as a musician, man. It really is.
Right.
It's we've all got a million stories, man. It's
I don't miss schlepping. Oh, that's the absolute worst part of the gig. I'm always like, and why didn't I take up piccolo? I bet that piccolo player would be set up by now.
I still load a Leslie in and out of my car not every weekend, but
oh my God,
I did last night.
Jeez, dude, and you're pushing 60. How does your back handle that, dude? You just
you get it down. And once you get, the thing is that my problem is like it sounds so good once I'm in the gig and playing. It's just that visceral experience of it.
Well, I mean, I can confirm that. I mean, and I noticed this like right away in the mastermind. You started bringing some things, and there's a Leslie kind of in the back, right, of your shot, right there. And so, by the way, it's a very, very nice studio. You got the fireplace behind you. It's just super inviting. It's like your studio looks like looks like a grown up studio. It's like that's what I want to be when I grow up.
It's a family room essentially, but I got all my stuff in it.
You've done it up right, but there's this real live Leslie cab, B3 organ in the back, and you started putting that on your cues, and the difference that it makes. Is it just that the plugins aren't good, or are they not good enough, or is it when you're playing it like a different Dale takes over than if you're playing on a MIDI controller?
It's what it would be. I think the analog for that would be if you were playing your own drum tracks. How the way you lay into it. So the plugins these days, the B3, the Hammond plugins are amazing. I mean, they sound fabulous. But the Hammond organ it's like a living, breathing instrument, and though you play it with your whole body. And so when you're leaning into a performance, it's like it's like all of that nuance that goes into it. Not to mention miking it in the room and the way that the audio tracks sound, versus a sample. So, I'm obviously a big proponent of live.
Now, are there some times when you just can't be bothered? You're like, I can't. Okay, I'm just gonna,
for sure. So I'll use whatever I've got. I've got a ton of them. And if the part is something that's like backgroundy, or depending on the style, also, hip hop cue, and I brought some organ in it, I'm not gonna mic up the Leslie for that. So. Yeah, there are times.
Okay. All right. It's kind of like when I'm like, I can't be bothered like miking up my drum set or anything like that. But I will say there is something there's an intangible quality that your live B3 is. It's undeniable for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, like I heard the thing you played some drums for a cue that Mikal Sinka did. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, it was great. It's like, you might've just did the top part of the groove. I can't remember specifically, but it was like a major difference. The feel was amazing, So
it makes a big difference. And so every time one of your cues comes across, the feedback or session or for the briefing room or whatever, I'm like, all right, Here we go. I get to hear some top quality, top quality Dale lines, and just from all of your players. And I think, just in our time together, I already know like the quality that you're going to bring, and I can only imagine that's the way it goes with libraries. If you're submitting to a publisher, if you have this bar of quality, which is higher, just because you are flexing your superpower, right? To go back to this, because being a B3 player, having a B3, and having this connection to all of these players in town, and knowing how to get the best out of them, knowing how to work them into your queue to where it doesn't really kind of slow down your process and all of that. I mean, that's your superpower. And so, speaking of, do you have a secret to working with collaborators and it not getting kind of bogged down in the details? Is it all about preparation, or is it about letting them do their thing and not micromanaging? I mean, what's the real secret to effectively working with collaborators?
It's well, you know what? It's like, and I know I was kind of preaching the preparation thing before and being specific, but it's a combination of preparedness on the part of the composer, producer. I mean, because we're producers. It's a preparedness walking into the session. If you're, but it's also, you're hiring a professional musician to bring. You want them to bring to the table what it is they do great. And so you gotta, I forget the old saying. It's like, you gotta let God in the cracks, right? And it's like, so. There's an element of that, but within that, okay, it's like you're in a studio, okay, especially if you're in a recording environment with several people, you can only let so much God in the cracks before you got to crack the whip and keep the train on the tracks, right? So you can't let things get too out in the weeds. So, it's a matter of respecting the amount of time that people are putting into things, and keeping your focus on what the goal is, what you need out of this specific track. It's like, I don't know, it's like, let's bring up an example. If you hire a bass player to play on a funk track or something like that, it's like, you're hiring a funky bass player, clearly, and it's like you want him to bring the funk. So It's like you want him to do what he wants, but somewhere in your head, what is appropriate for this cue. It's for sync, after all, and you don't want somebody slapping and popping all over something while there's a voiceover going on. So you have to rein him in and just allow him to do his thing within the confines of what it should be.
Gotcha.
So, and being able to articulate that takes a little bit of finesse. And saying things to people, especially if they're, of a certain level, where you're not offending them. You just have to kind of like play that with kid gloves a little bit sometimes. But
yeah, it's a balancing act, because we are all of us who are performers. There's no small amount of ego, and I think it takes just a baseline amount of ego and vanity and confidence to just go on stage and perform, in front of other people. And so I know that some players will bring that into the studio, but if you're on like Bambi legs and you don't exactly know what you want, and it's all super kind of wishy-washy, then that's the energy you're going to get back. And so sprinkle in a little bit of ego and a little bit of I'm not getting paid for this, a little bit of unpreparedness, and before you know it, you've got this stew that's going to start stinking up the joint, and now you have a bad experience and all of that.
It's very true.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit, because one of the things that, on top of your resume of very, very impressive gigs and performers and everything, one of the things that I know that you do is music direct, and you have recently started kind of branching out into doing some music arrangement, composition, orchestrations for some musical theater that has really started taking off. Can you, obviously, I'm not sure where it is. I'm not sure how much you could talk about, if it's allowed to be talked about or whatever. So within the confines of whatever non-disclosure agreement you have on board, can we talk about that process and just playing in that sandbox for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, my to roll the clock back, my experience in musical theater is actually pretty limited. I started doing some pit work. There's a couple big theaters in Detroit, and through being on the scene for so long, it's like I started doing pit work probably in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
Just I got a reputation of being a good player and a good reader, and so I
Yeah,
started
something
getting the
comes through
calls.
town. They need an organist. They need a pianist. Call Dale. He's going to take care
Yeah,
of you.
right. And people knew that I was a pop and jazz piano player, and so when like rock shows would come through town or whatever, I'd get those calls. Um, and so I got to be friends with the contractor through Detroit Symphony, and so just a lot of connections from being around. So played a number of shows for the national tours that would come through town,
Hmm.
and so that just kind of got my feet wet. And it's like, because theater, to be honest, I never listened to it, never gave it a thought, it was never even remotely on my radar. So, through a lot of those same types of circles, I started music directing and performing for a singer of note in Detroit, Karen Newman. And she was the singer for the Red Wings for doing the oh my God, what is it? The national anthem.
Right.
For years she did it, but fabulous singer, like legit could really kill it. And she did we used to do a big Christmas show every year, and she would do it at the Fox Theater downtown. And I played it a number of times and music directed it a handful of times. But through that, I met a composer. He came to one of the shows, Scott Wilkinson, and Scott, this is 2013. This is going back a minute now. Approached me. He came to me with he had an idea for a musical, and all he was approaching me about was cutting the demos because I was working at a recording studio. He wanted to come in and cut the demos. He goes, he also heard some orchestrations that I did for that show. And he's like, I would like to do blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, great, another client, come on in, And anyway, if we roll the clock forward, it's been 10 years. That show has exploded as far as it's in development. Mind you, it's being written, but the level of interest, the amount of money they've raised, the team, the creative team, which for 8 years was me and Scott, and it was like he was like moving and shaking and writing, and we're just doing our thing kind of passively for a while. It took on a whole new fervor, especially post-COVID. Well, actually pre-COVID too, but now we have. We have the director. I'm sorry, the director and the book writer are out of New York now, and I have kind of pulled back from being music director because it's like I really don't have that pedigree as far as music directorship goes, and so I'm officially the music supervisor on it. And we have now a music director out of New York City. Connor Doran is outstanding, young guy, kills it, and so.
A guy who knows how to work with a company and rehearse them, and
Correct.
knows how to workshop it and all that, which I think is just another example of the collaborative spirit that you just embody in your work, which is, here's what I'm really good at. And at some point you're going to hand over the reins to somebody who can take it and have it be the best version of itself, which
absolutely,
takes no small amount of self-awareness in what you are and aren't able to do.
Well, yeah. And it's like at a certain point, you just got to go, I have to respect what this project is and what it needs.
Right.
And it's like, I know where my strengths are and I know where they aren't. And it's, so having somebody with a choral pedigree and he's conducting, and I was great, it's like, so, yeah. So, but the show is based on the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I think we talked about this at one point, and it was called Bonhoeffer the Musical for the longest time, but is now Rise is the name of is the title of the show. The composer is Scott Wilkinson. He's based in Detroit. He's an outstanding writer, absolutely outstanding, and the director is Richard Blake, who is a really seasoned Broadway actor. And his leads in probably 20 shows over the past 15 years, something like that. And has now moved into directing. He's a little bit older, not really, but he's moved into directing. The book writer is Eric Webb. And Yeah, once again, the music director is Connor Doran, and so next year, the next thing on our plate is that in spring of 2025, we're going to be going to New York for about 3 weeks to do a lab.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be a full-blown workshop with performances at the end in a theater, probably partial blocking,
Yeah.
maybe on book, maybe off book. I don't know, with a pit, and with a pit meaning a band.
Sure. Yeah.
And and at that time they're going to be bringing in artistic directors from theaters around the country, regional theaters around the country, and hopefully by fall of 2025 we should see an opening.
Yeah, it's like
it will happen. I guarantee it.
Oh yeah,
open.
let's
it's gone this far.
Let's put that on the whiteboard right now, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, if you're not familiar with that whole side of like the music industry, like musical theater shares so much with like how a sitcom gets produced, where you'll have a team of people, or a movie or something like that, a team of small people passion projecting it, into existence. And then at some point, some sparks ignite, and then it attracts the attention of many other people.
Right.
And then money starts getting kind of pumped into it, and starts like seemingly overnight, even though you've been chipping away at it for a decade, seemingly overnight, it just blows up into this thing. And so, I'm super happy for you. That's so exciting. As somebody with a pretty steep pedigree in performing music theater, like I know how all of that sausage gets made, and for you to be involved in that, especially something that could end up like on the Tony stage. That's amazing, man. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And it's circling back to our last conversation about collaboration. It's like, this is the height of collaboration, where you've got all of those elements of egos and opinions, and people with like all kinds of different backgrounds and professional backgrounds, and then people at really high levels. It's like, and I mean, my God, the last reading we did, it's just like, the readings in New York City you do them during the day. Meanwhile, everybody that's in the room has got a gig that night on Broadway.
That's right.
We had like, it was crazy, so in a great way. And 99% of the time, everyone is gracious and creative and wonderful. And, but you're still in that, sitting at the creative table with the team of creatives, you're still managing input.
Yeah.
And you have to know how to manage that situation. It is no different than being in the recording studio with a big ensemble for me, which is what I come from. And it's like, so I hope that in the musical theater world, I can bring in some of that expertise, And
in the theater world, it's like everybody mutually agrees that we are all adding our contributions to make a greater whole. And that's so mirrored in what production music is about. You know what I mean? Man. Like if you are a songwriter, if you write unless your name, rhymes with Min-Manuel Miranda, nobody like knows who, the general population does not know who these songwriters are for some of these. Pasek and Paul, I think, are the next ones who are kind of pushing through the consciousness. But then you have like Sondheims, but nobody knows who you are. And so in the production music space, it's very much the same way. We're writing music that's going to help somebody else tell their story. But at the end of the day, our music isn't the main attraction here.
Well, absolutely. And it's like having that humility, the way that you face a cue, even though that's like a kind of a microcosm of what a show is, but the mindset is exactly the same.
Yep.
It's like you're honoring something else, and you're there for that purpose. And you have to, in a sense, you got to check your ego at the door and go, I'm here for a purpose. I'm here to do a job. And,
yeah. So it's no mystery to me why you would be as interested in studio work, live work, production music, and theater, because they are all just shades of the same color. It's all just different parts of the same muscle. I've
looked at production music the same way. It's just, It really is. It's just it's more of the same thing that we all do. And it's like
Yeah.
at the beginning of all of this, we're, as far as like I'll speak to like the 52 Qs community. We're either musicians or producers who have, use the DAW and the computer as their instrument, which is equally as creative. And everything that we do as far as production music concerns is an extension of that.
Yep.
And
100%. Well, Dale, what I'd love to do right now is I would love to hear some of your stuff, and specifically, I would love to hear you blowing on B3 and maybe bringing in some horn play. Do you have a cue that we've recently put together that maybe you could share with us?
Yeah, Rob from RR Hot, we're putting the NFL stuff together. So I've got a funk track that I did with for the NFL stuff, and this features my buddy Bobby Strang, who's a saxophone player. He cut all of the horns on this, and it's actually live. There's a live bass player, and I'm playing B3 and grand piano on it too.
Oh, wow.
So it's mostly live instruments. I programmed the drums, and then like any incidental percussion. Can't remember, there might be congas and stuff in it. That's all programmed, but basically I built it, kind of that way.
All right. So let's take a listen to this. Is this Hotter Than Funk? Is that what we're about to listen to?
It's Hotter Than Funk.
Let's listen to Hotter Than Funk. All right, that was hotter than funk. Is it hotter than funk or is it hotter than funk?
It's Hotter Than Funk.
Oh man, it's probably too late to request a title change. Hotter than funk.
Yeah,
But that was for our that was in the spring, early summer, our briefing room search for the NFL Qs on CBS. And dude, that is, I mean, I've heard some very convincing like programming before, but it's undeniable when you bring these hot players in and these top players, how much they add. Now, was this just like one horn player kind of stacking and double tracking, or did you bring in like the whole like Memphis horns, and did you bring in the Funk Brothers?
No, this is one player. This is Bobby Strang. He's like I said, he's an A-list saxophone player in Detroit. He's actually in Ann Arbor, but and he's the guy that I said he's got a really great home recording rig and really does it well. He actually does. He does for all you microphone geeks. He uses a Coles ribbon mic, and then he's got another mic. I don't know which one it is, but he does a mid-side thing.
Oh wow!
And then so he cuts them, and then he gives me a instead of 2 tracks, or that would be 3 tracks per horn, he does a mix down of each one. He consolidates it so that but on this track in particular, I think it's 5 parts.
Wow.
And so he wrote the arrangement for that. So it's Barry, tenor, alto, maybe 2 alto. I can't remember. It was been a minute, so I apologize. But I believe that it's 5 parts, but with Barry, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's just one of those instances where you have talented people and you let talented people be talented and just get out of their way.
Exactly. So, and it's like we kind of went back and forth with where we want the lines and stuff. And then he sent me stuff and I said, let's change this or whatever. We go back and forth, but we did it all remotely.
Kill it. So, absolutely crush it. Well, I am, as we are recording, football season's about to kick off. By the time this comes out, football season will. But so hopefully, maybe we've already heard this, and we'll start getting some placement and some love. And I believe there's also been some other kind of placements that you've gotten.
Yeah, recently. So through 10 West Music in Hollywood and Chuck Henry, I got a commercial for Meili Sauces, which is a competitor of like Grey Poupon. And it played back in the end of 2023. And it was one of those things I didn't even know that it happened. Like, I think one of the members of the community saw it posted somewhere. And so I called Chuck. So that was a really great thing. But I got to say, Dave, that commercial. So this is funny. It's like I did for Chuck Henry, I did an album of tangos. So this was early on when I first started doing this. And that's kind of a funny story, but another time. But I did an album of tangos. And when I got, as you know, it's like you get to the end, you're working on the 10th or 11th track and you're like, I'm out of ideas on tangos, man. It's like, I can't do this anymore, So Chuck had kind of given me free license to like broaden out of the tango thing into other forms of like Latin music or things with similar ilk, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna do a bolero, right? So I like, of course, you gotta rip off Ravel's bolero, right? So I went right for that groove, the snare drum thing, and then I rewrote the rest of it. And actually, there's a live violinist on it. And so I did this whole orchestration, wrote the whole thing out because it's fun and I love to do that. And the reason, so it was used for this commercial and it was chosen. I remember it going down where Chuck had contacted me and said, he goes, you've got one of your tangos is up for this commercial. And I was like, great. I go, what do you need from me? He goes, they need the stems right away, like today. He goes, if they're in today, you got a chance. If it's tomorrow, you won't get it. Because it's like their, production deadlines or whatever. Yeah. So I was in the studio that day. I got all the stems together, shipped them out, and didn't hear anything for 6 months, right? And but anyway, what shook down on the thing is that from the mastermind and from the things that you taught me as far as the way cues are constructed, I did very specific edit points and the changes in the music happened at very tight things. So when you listen to the music with the picture, that's why it worked. That is why it worked. Those edit points, those things are so important. And it's like, so this is as much your success as it is mine, man. Believe me.
Oh, well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for saying that and for the kind words. And it couldn't be more deserved. You want to talk about somebody putting in their 10,000 hours, you're doing it, you're doing the work, you have earned the success that you've gotten, and you're just a nice guy. You know what I mean? On paper, likewise. You should be much more of a jerk than you actually are. Like you have earned the right to be a lot crustier than you are, but just super humble, down to earth, and easy to work with, easy to talk to. And it's no wonder that on one hand you're gigging, actively, and writing Broadway musicals and getting placements in national ad campaigns. And so Dale, man, I wish you all the success. Congratulations. Thank you for being such a valuable part of the community. You'll show up to the feedback sessions, even if you don't have anything, you're just kind of pouring into the community, paying what you can forward, and learning and growing alongside us. So just thank you so much for your support, and congratulations on all your success, my man.
Well, thank you, Dave. And it's an honor to be here and in your presence. And like I said, I've learned so much, I love, so on a parting shot, then I got to say, it's like you told me early on in one of our sessions, it's just like, cause I was writing stuff like songs, right? Or whatever. I don't even remember. And you're like, no, man, this plays by its own rules. And I swear, I think about that every time I'm writing a cue. Plays by its own rules. You can't apply. I mean, it borrows from everything, right?
Yep.
Borrows from everything. But there's those rules exist for a reason.
Well, yeah, it's like if you were to write a pop song and try to sit it into a musical theater number, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
Like you have like an I Want song and you have a patter song. Like musical theater plays by its own rules.
Exactly.
Pop music played by its own rules.
Yep.
Production music plays by its own rules, and you can be in both. You just have to make sure that you're speaking the right language in the right country.
Yeah.
Well, Dale, once again, congratulations on all your success. I'm looking forward to hearing much more about your successes. But thank you so much for joining me today, my man.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Once again, a huge word of thanks to Dale for joining me on the podcast. And of course, we will have his links in the description below. We're going to take a quick break, and you're going to hear from an alternate reality version of me tell you all about how you can join 52 Cues. And when we return, we are going to check out Here I Dembo Again, which is a Latin pop cue I worked up in collaboration with Jeff LaPlante. Every week I talk about how this episode and the podcast and the community, the channel, would not be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbors, subscribers of 52 Cues, who do pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. And in addition to being thriving members of the community, as well as supporting me and Shannon and everything that we're doing here, they also receive extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video archives, weekly cue breakdowns, production music almanac, living ebook, and the opportunities to submit to real music libraries. Now, it's free to join 52 Cues. You can just go to 52cues.com and sign up, be a member of the community. We would love to have you. It will always be free to join the community. But if you've been watching, or if maybe this is your first time, but if you're wondering, is there a way to kind of level up my production music skills in the industry, meeting like-minded, super friendly, very generous composers? Then why don't you think about subscribing? Memberships start at around $4 a month, and we would love to have you. Again, that's 52cues.com. That was Here I Dembo Again. Of course, Dembo being the percussion rhythm, the boom, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. That's a Dembo rhythm. For you family, friends, and neighbor subscribers, you can check out this cue being put together in real time during our recent live stream. The archive is posted up. And for family and friends, if you want a deep dive into this cue, how it was put together, the mix, the mastering, as well as the different layers, then you can check this out because it was on last week's cue breakdown. But that is going to do it for us this week. You definitely want to tune in next week because I'm going to be unpacking how I use and incorporate and my philosophy behind risers and transitions. Risers, sweeps, transitions, my philosophy behind these little transitional elements. And you definitely want to tune in next week for that. But I hope you've had an amazing week. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know you have a ton of options out there, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the audio podcast on the go. Just know that I love and appreciate every single one of you. If you like the podcast, then consider maybe paying it forward by giving it a 5-star review. If you like this on YouTube, the thumbs up, the subscribe, all of those things, they help other folks find me. But I hope you've had a great week, and I know you are going to have an amazing week next week. How do I know that? Because I trust and believe that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2024 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community or becoming a member subscriber of 52 Cues, head over to 52cues.com.